Hey guys, it's the Diesel Queen. Welcome to my Overhauled podcast. I have to make an apology to you guys. My first few podcasts were a little screwed up. Long story short, it had to be kind of cropped down a little bit because I am technologically challenged. Back to how I am a heavy equipment mechanic, not a professional YouTuber or a podcaster. So please bear with my fuck ups and enjoy these podcasts. Again, I apologize. I'm a heavy equipment mechanic trying to make podcasts, so bear with me. This is Melissa back with another episode of the Overhauled with the Diesel Queen. I have Marshall here with me today. He is a current mechanic at Kenworth. So Marshall, why don't you introduce yourself and kind of give us a background on your experience, where you work, how you got into the industry, etc.
Yeah, so my name is Marshall Sheldon. I work at a Kenworth dealer. I've been a diesel mechanic for about 15 years. I specialize in Cummins mainly, but I just like most diesel mechanics, kind of work on whatever they ask us to work on.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. And before I worked for Kenworth, I worked for a Volvo dealer. And before that, I worked at a fleet shop, but that fleet shop was all Kenworth. So it was it was a pretty easy transition for me to come to Kenworth because I was pretty familiar with the chassis.
And I have here that you did not take the route of going to a trade school. You started washing trucks, and that's how you
Yeah,
got
yeah,
into it.
so, yeah, 100%. So I got out of the Marine Corps, and I was in the Marine Corps before that. And but when I got out, I kind of just took me a break, and then I went to work at that fleet shop, and the foreman, I met up with the foreman. They had an ad in the newspaper, like phones aren't like they are now, but back then,
Yeah.
and so I seen an ad in the newspaper, and then I went over there and talked to the foreman, and they were looking for a wash hand. I think it was like $12.50 an hour is what it was paying, and I just needed a job. So he did the normal, can you do this, and can you weld, or can you do anything like that? I'm like, dude, I don't even know how to change a battery. So he was like, dude, I was like, but dude, if you hire me on, dude, I'll work my guts out for you. I promise you that. So he hired me on, and yeah, I just washed trucks, and whenever, like, I was pretty motivated to make more money, like most people are.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of the way to make more money in the field is to learn more stuff. So the more stuff you know, the more money you can make. And
Yep.
so my
Knowledge
goal,
is like gold.
that's right. And so
Yep.
I just, whenever I saw the mechanics doing something, I try to get the jack stands out. They're trying to take a wheel off or something. I seen them jacking something up, or I could see that they were clearly going to change a flat tire or something there. I would grab the jack stands if I wasn't washing a truck and try to help them out, and they would teach me stuff along the way. This is what we torque the lug nuts to, that kind of stuff. And so I just cruised right along and just tried to learn anything and everything I could along the way, washing parts. Like, hey, can I wash this part? What is this part called? What does this part do? And they would always just, because I was helping them out, they'd always just teach me stuff.
And you feel like they were more than willing to share knowledge with you then?
Yeah, so I think it's because it was a two-way street, because they could see that I was trying,
Yeah.
and I wanted to help. I think that was the key thing, because now that we're senior mechanics, you and I, we can say that, like, there's a lot of times where a big job, you have it blowed apart, you have stuff everywhere, and it can be a little overwhelming, even
Yeah.
for us that have done, even if you've done that job 100 times, it can still, sometimes you can look back at all that stuff, that ocean of parts that you just blown apart, and be like, golly, I got to put all that crap back together.
Yep.
And so I think when I would jump in there and be like, hey, can I do these little things that add up to a lot when you're doing a big job like that, washing all the skiers and washing all this stuff, you know, they were willing to reciprocate with the, giving me some knowledge that I was asking for.
Yeah. And so from there, what when did you, or how did you transition from, kind of being a helper slash wash hand to being hired on as a full-time mechanic?
Right. So I was pretty fortunate. Like I said, that fleet shop really was the key, I think, to my whole career, really, because that foreman that I had was pretty cool. And his name's Nate Nielsen. Shout out. Um, he he was pretty cool because he could see that you were trying, and then he would push you into something that he knew that you couldn't do,
Yep.
but or that you would struggle through, but that you could eventually figure it out, So he would
Yep.
he'd put me on an alternator or something like that. And then once I got pretty good at doing something like that, he would just kind of work me in. And then he just one day he's like, "Hey, congratulations! I just promoted you to lube tech, and that comes with a pay raise. So on this next check, you're going to see your pay raise on there. Just keep doing what you're doing and just stay after it and be hungry." So that's what I did. I just kept pushing on it, and then eventually it kind of worked out to where Nate ended up going to Kenworth there in town, and our one of our senior guys that we had, he also went to Kenworth at the same time within like 2 weeks. And
That's I've seen that in shops happen a lot. Once one person leaves, it's kind of like a rolling hill of a bunch of people
yeah,
following them, as long as they were like, not the guy that everybody despised,
right,
yeah.
right. And Nate was really the leader. So when one guy left, they all kind of,
Yeah.
the two of them, they kind of followed with him. And so I was there, but Nate, without really knowing it, but Nate trained me how to run the shop. So he taught me how to order all the parts, who we order what parts from. So I kind of filled that role for quite a while as the foreman in the shop.
Mm-hmm.
I hired on several hands and just worked through it. And that's pretty much how it transitioned to be in full mechanic mode,
So you've been doing this for 5 years now?
15.
15. Okay. She had that written down wrong. 15 years. So what big differences did you notice going from a fleet mechanic to a dealer? That Kenworth, the Kenworth shop you worked at was dealership, correct?
Yeah.
So what differences did you notice going from, especially like enlighten me, because I've only worked at dealerships. So enlighten me on the difference between working in a fleet shop versus working in a dealership.
So I feel like most diesel shops in general, I would say a large percentage of them are already hourly. So that's quite a bit different than, a lot of the automotive stuff. But like the biggest difference I would say is that in a fleet shop, you have a truck come in, like for instance, and the truck would come in and it's got to get fixed right now. And then it's got to go back on the road. And, in the dealer, I feel like you can put it off a little bit more because you're not as in much of a rush because you don't have so much in it. You're not so invested because like that's when you're in the fleet, that's your truck.
Yeah.
When you're of course when you're in a dealer, you want to get all the trucks out as quickly as you can, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't mean as much to you personally.
Yeah.
Because you don't know that person. And, like I knew every one of those drivers. I knew all of their names. I knew which truck they drove. I knew what was going on with that truck because I saw it all the time. That's also a major difference is you know each truck. You have a mental note of what you've done to that truck, what components have been changed, So it's kind of nice because you have a thorough understanding of that personal piece of equipment because you've
Yeah.
seen it all the time, So I think that's pretty good. And then also you you do a lot more fixing and a lot less replacing
At a fleet.
at a fleet
Yeah.
shop. So like you might pull a turbo apart and actually rebuild that turbo and put it back on the truck.
Yeah.
Whereas at a dealer, the liability of that going cross country is a lot more. And so we need to be able to give our customers a warrantable repair that they can go down the road. And if they go to another Cummins distributor, if it's a Cummins engine, say, and then they can just get that part swapped out if it's under warranty still, you know.
Well,
Whereas
so
do that.
truck dealer, I'm assuming, so enlighten me, correct me if I'm wrong, but at John Deere, at our dealerships, it, it wasn't just the pricing of the labor and the parts. It was also that exactly what you just talked about was the warranty, right? So engine rebuilds, for an example. I have done a couple professional, like full on, and I'm not just talking long block. A lot of people mistake, oh, I did an engine rebuild. No, you bolted a head onto an already built short block, or, you bolted a bunch of parts back onto a already assembled engine. Like, that's not really a rebuild. So I've done a couple full on, you replace the liners, replace the pistons, cam bushings. I've done a couple actual rebuilds for a dealership, but the problem that we came down to a lot was customers wanted that 2-year warranty on that engine from John Deere, right? That fully completed, or long block, short block, whatever, mostly long blocks and complete engines. The warranty for that engine shipped from John Deere as a reman or a new one, depending on, when COVID happened, it was really hard to get reman engines. So you had to buy a lot of new ones. That to the customer is worth more than, okay, an actual rebuild was going to cost a lot less, but I only get 90 days of, obviously the parts warranties are 2 years, but I only get 90 days of the labor warranty. So in a sense, dealerships have created it to where you're not doing component rebuilds, just like you did, like what you were saying. Obviously, we did a lot of transmission teardowns. We did a lot of that stuff. Because, for an example, a John Deere backhoe transmission, their J series had problems with the K2 clutch pack inside their transmissions. Warranty actually had you, and we still do this today as a repair for clutch packs a lot of times, is we tear that transmission apart, split it, replace that clutch pack, and then put it back together. It's only specific ones though, like the K2 clutch pack, you can just do it as an assembly. Like you can buy the assembly clutch pack and you just split it, you plop it in there, because their transmissions are, in these backhoes, have hydraulic clutch packs inside of them, and then their gears. So you can just take a clutch pack out. I mean, sometimes you got to take like 3 of them in a group out and then put them back in. But it was cost effective because you didn't have to tear that clutch pack apart on top of taking the transmission apart. You just had to plop it back in. Now you have another clutch pack fail, which I've done this a million times too, is, let's say you have the forward clutch pack fail, where you actually have to take that whole clutch pack apart and rebuild it if that's what you choose to do. You can't just buy it as an assembly. In that case, we would put a reman transmission in that, because the extra labor it would cost wouldn't be cost effective for the customer at all. And what you're telling me, which is kind of what I already assumed, is in fleet, the fleet's paying you your hourly rate. At a dealership, you're getting, the customer is getting charged the dealership hourly rate, not your hourly rate.
That's
and it's a big difference. The engine rebuild that I did do on an 8310R tractor for a John Deere dealership, that was the dealership's rental tractor. So in the grand scheme of things, at the end of the day, the cost of that rebuild was my hourly rate, because it was their fleet tractor. But as far as customers go, it usually is a lot more cost effective to just replace stuff. We still do a lot of component teardowns and rebuilds. Engines are a big thing that, like, for warranty, sometimes we'll tear it down and see what's actually wrong with it. Sometimes the customer will want us to tear it down because if it's only one cylinder and one jug that we can replace, we do that. But for the most part, you are correct. It is much more cost effective for the customer to just replace the whole thing.
For I think it would kind of depend on the engine manufacturer for like heavy duty trucks, because Cummins, I can do a now overhaul, which is it's a more in-depth overhaul where everything is measured you should measure everything anyway, but these are a lot of things have to be recorded for Cummins, and then the customer can purchase additional warranty. I believe that's how it works. It's been a few years since I've done one because not a lot of people opt for it, but there is an option from Cummins at least where you can purchase an additional warranty on a rebuild, like if I do a full overhaul, because I
Mm-hmm.
am now certified from Cummins. But that
Okay.
technician that does that has to have that
The
certification. And I'm
certification. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I'm not sure that a lot of the facilities probably are now certified, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And every manufacturer does all of, like you just said, everything differently. You know, John Deere, we had a bunch of certifications. We had what we call capstones. And obviously we're not dealing with multiple, well, that's a lie. We do deal with some different engine manufacturers. We do have Cummins in
You guys do?
our big forage harvesters and our big 9R tractors. We have the QSX15 in those.
Yeah.
And then we have Yanmar in some of our skid steers and little mini X's. And then we have a Zuzu actually in a lot of the excavators, because John Deere excavators, up until recently, they dropped the contract with Hitachi just this year. But up until recently, most John Deere excavators they're actually Hitachi excavators. So
Oh, no.
Hitachi uses Isuzu. So, you know, you have a Hitachi excavator, it's going to have the Isuzu in it. You buy a John Deere excavator, which is pretty much a Hitachi with yellow paint. You can get a John Deere engine in that. Most of them had Isuzu. So, but we never had really, we also dealt with, so I also worked at a dealership that sold cranes, Grove Cranes, Manitowoc. They
Yeah.
run a lot of Cummins in their stuff.
Yeah.
And Workin is the paving equipment manufacturer that John Deere bought out not too long ago. They have they have different engines in them. I never really worked out on the paving equipment that much, so I'm not going to pretend to know what
Yeah.
engines they have in them, but it
Well, it's
is
pretty
just
cool.
dealing with the difference between like Isuzu warranty. I've had to deal with Isuzu warranty before versus John Deere warranty, and it is a whole different ballpark. Even though their parent, like their companies working together, like you have to go through John Deere DTAC and you have to go through the John Deere engineers and you have to go through the John Deere warranty people, and they actually have to contact Isuzu and Hitachi and then rely it back to you. So it's
Yeah,
kind of a pain in the ass.
there's a lot for the technicians. Like people don't realize that like which it sounds like you do too. Like I pretty much specialize not only in building a Cummins engine, but also working my way through a Cummins warranty. And it sounds like you do the same thing with yours. I was going to add a point that I do carry all of the QSX engine certifications and the specific John Deere Cummins certifications, which is actually pretty cool because I haven't actually had the opportunity to work on a Cummins and a John Deere, but if the opportunity arises, I'd be ready to go.
Yeah, we had because Cummins has, like as you were saying, Cummins required certifications to work on their engines, especially warranty work, which is what our capstones on John Deere do. All they do is allow you to have your time to be paid for the equipment that you're working on. But the specific Cummins, you have to have that. Like you can have a 9R tractor. Well, to get the 9R tractor capstone for scraper tractors or 9570s and the 9670s are the ones that came with, let's see, I think I had that right, 9570 and a 9620 maybe. They made you go through the Cummins certification specifically for Cummins to even get that capstone, because Cummins requires you to have
Right.
that training. And I tell you what, that Cummins class that I took was the best capstone class or the best certification class I had ever gone to. And I've been through to a million John Deere training classes.
Yeah.
And that one put on by Cummins was the best. I mean, we were retiming the front gear case. We were taking injectors out, like tearing all kinds of shit apart. It was cool as fuck.
Oh yeah, the Cummins puts on some pretty bitchin' training stuff. like I'm in the South now. I think you're up in the Midwest somewhere now. When I was in Wyoming, I went to Salt Lake for Cummins training, and those were equally as awesome because those training facilities have all the mining equipment, all the mining engines and stuff like that. And then the ones down here in the South, I noticed at Cummins Power South, they have all the marine stuff. So
Yeah.
like when I put a Cummins training, there would be a whole class there also doing marine controls and stuff like that. It's pretty intense stuff, but I'm with you. I like the how hands-on you have to pass a hands-on course and you have to
Yep.
pass a written course,
Which you do with
I
John
find
Deere
is
too. Like their capstones, they have a written and a hands-on, but their hands-on is all like, we bugged this machine, you know,
right.
you got to figure out what we bugged. With the exception of the, like, so every single John Deere dealer or capstone I've gone to, you can prove what they bugged because you can find the bugs.
Yeah,
I did go to their mid-size excavator capstone, and you cannot. They actually, like, they were doing shit like swapping out little relief valves in the pilot manifold for their excavators, like all kinds of sneaky ass shit. And there's no way you could figure that out unless you looked at the hydraulic schematic and you draw your little lines tracing everything as to where the oil would go with this and that. And then you have to figure
right.
out, okay, if this relief valve or this check valve, it was by chance, removed and had a hole drilled through it and then put back in, that's where the oil would be going. And that was the hardest capstone training I ever did, was the mid-size excavator capstone training for John Deere. But the Cummins class, engine class that I did, I loved, because John Deere does not usually have you tear anything down. None of their capstones are tearing stuff down. All of their capstones is like, we're going to go through every single hydraulic schematic on this machine. We're going to go through every single electric schematic on this machine. We're going to learn the theory of operation on all this shit. And then here's your tests. And which is good. Like, you learn a lot of shit. And a lot of the capstones that I did, especially through Hanan, which was my first dealership, they had in-house trainers. And a lot of their in-house trainers were old field mechanics. So when they would teach you, be like, oh, here's a schematic. Here's what can go wrong because I've seen this and this is what it creates. That was pretty cool. But the Cummins one, their hands-on was not a find a bug in the engine. Their hands-on was, you had to run fuel tests, you had to run def tests, and you actually had to run the tests. Like, you had to hook up the hoses. A lot of the shit that mechanics will try to like skip over and do that last because it's a pain in the ass to hook everything up. They made you do in those tests, and it was good. I got a lot out of that Cummins training class, which is something I did want to touch on in this podcast series, is the value of training your mechanics, even after they've been hired on with you and after they've been through trade school or not trade school. The value of continuing the training for your mechanics, and the value that it is worth, in my mind, it is worth the price you pay to send your technicians to these classes to get a lot of this knowledge. And, obviously there's, I'm sure you've known and seen, there's mechanics that go to these trainings that view it as a little vacation and they don't take it seriously at all.
Oh yeah.
But obviously there's those of us out there that do. Like, I told a story on one of my last podcasts of, I went to a grader capstone when I was first started into the dealership for John Deere. I think at most I'd replace batteries on graders, maybe done the circle side shift adjustments and shit like that. I did not know that much about graders. I went to this capstone knowing I did not know what the fuck I was doing, right? I don't know what the fuck I'm looking at. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm here to learn because I don't know what I'm doing. There was an older gentleman in that class that, he was one of those mechanics of, I already know everything. I've been working on these since I was 12. Kind of shit, those people. And I slaughtered him in that fucking test. I got a 98% in that grader capstone, which was actually the highest grade in that class. And this older gentleman that claimed he knew everything and didn't need to be in this class he barely passed. Barely passed. He had kids in there that were 20. I was 19. You know, he had kids in there that were like kids to him that completely fucking slaughtered him. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's kind of the thing I've been touching on here and there in my podcast series is the value and the benefit of the training. And obviously hands-on training is valuable, correct?
Yeah.
And you can't learn everything from looking at a book, right, and reading schematics. But when it comes down to learning, what I find the value in a lot of these trainings is learning. You can't properly diagnose anything unless you understand how it works. And sometimes the manual in the book doesn't quite get you there to fully, theory of operations sometimes don't quite get you into that full understanding of how a system works. And, you know, I went through Wyotech, so I had to learn all the air brake systems that you work on and the transmissions and how the power flows through the transmissions and stuff like that. Like, I feel like there are mechanics out there, especially the older generation, that take that for granted. And especially with the new electronic systems, which I'm sure you run into a bunch of it on semis, it's really important to understand how the system works before you try to dive into a diagnostic scenario of that.
And I feel like to circle back on that is a lot of that comes down to confidence, because I mentor junior technicians pretty exclusively here at the dealer that I work at. And what I find that the junior technicians have the hardest time, and I feel like I put a lot of focus in, is building their confidence.
Yeah.
You know, they get that training, you're getting them the OEM training that they need, and it's all up in their heads, and they're trying to transfer that down to their hands is the best way to describe it for me. And so they remembered learning this thing, and now they're trying to use the tool, and they're down there trying to do it, and it's like they give up quickly or something like that. And I find that they just struggle a lot with building their confidence. And so sometimes, like as senior techs, and we're out there with them and we help them along just enough to get them to where they needed to be with that tool. And then you've got to kind of celebrate that small win with them, because that builds that technician's confidence. And, you know, we used to grind through and just figure it out. And, you know, the newer hands that are coming in, they're not built like that. They need, I hate to say coddle, because I don't really feel like it's coddling, but they need a little help building their confidence.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up about, because part of this series is to try and help these, not only just bullshit about like turning wrenches and experiences, and try to help other new technicians understand what they can expect out of the industry, but it's also to kind of help these companies that are shorthanded as fuck and need technicians. What can they do better, or what can they incorporate in their trainings, in their company, into the way they run, to help not only get mechanics hired on, but keep these young mechanics? Because I'm trying to get people's opinion on that, and especially people that started from nothing. Like, I just spoke with a gentleman last time that he had no background at all in this industry, and he's thriving in it. But he tries really hard. He wants to learn, and he wants to do good. And those qualities, I think a lot of young technicians start with those qualities, but I've seen it crushed. I've seen or heard that be crushed, whether it's by the asshole they work next to, another mechanic in the shop, a foreman. I've seen that crushed by people, and it is sad to see that some people obviously just don't have that quality. But so I'm trying to help. In your opinion, what is something that dealerships or shops in general can do better to try to help these young technicians want to stay into the industry?
Yeah, so and even I struggle with that because, like I said, I mentor a new technician about every 8 months, 6 to 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you get in it 90 days and you realize, like, hey, this person may not be a good fit to be a mechanic. And I would say that's probably about 20%, because if you are doing a good job hiring them on, that you should be able to get some of that out. And then what to do to try to keep them in. It's kind of individualized. Some of these techs really want the training. They want the opportunity to go learn. And I feel like a lot of the shops don't send their technicians to the amount of training that they are trying to get. And I feel like even as a senior technician, sometimes I've run into that at dealers where I felt like they didn't want to put in as much as I'm putting in.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's pretty important that they contribute as much as I feel like I'm contributing. And that might be some communication with your management team, because if you go to your management team as a technician and you're like, hey, I don't feel like I'm getting a proper opportunity for training. I've done everything that I can do from my end, and I want to go to whatever training, hands-on course like we were talking about, and they still don't want to send you, then maybe that's not a good place for you, because if you're one of those people that thrive on the training, then evidently that's not a place for you, because they don't put a high value on training.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is the junior techs out there, especially right now with the way the world is, money is really important.
Yeah.
We got to make enough money to live. And then on top of that, we have to spend, I don't know what you spend, but I would say I probably spend, I'm trying to think of like a percentage, but maybe 15-20% of my pay goes right back into buying tooling
Tools.
that I
Yep.
need in the field. I'm at a point in my career where some of that stuff I bought at year 5, I have to replace it now. So
Yeah.
three-quarter impacts that I keep in my service truck. I have 2 half-inch air impacts. I just bought another one because I had to send the other one out. The very first one I ever bought, I had to send it out to get rebuilt, and I couldn't be without it. So I just bought another one while the other one was getting rebuilt, and so now I have 2. But the same with my 3/4. I'm gonna have to send it out, and a new one is $900. That's a lot of money. So junior techs, obviously we're not expecting them to have $1,000 tool like that, but we have to be dealers and shops need to understand that these technicians are spending a lot of money out of their pockets.
Especially when you're new,
Yeah.
especially when you're new. I had my first year in the industry, I had $10,000 worth of fucking tool bills to claim on taxes the next day. It was like 10 or 12 grand. The next year it was like 8. And then the next year it was like 6. Now I get away with, I think the last 2 years it was only like 4 grand ish, 5 grand, but that took me 7 years to get to the point where I was finally, I don't need to buy a bunch of shit every week. Obviously every technician has a problem where they're like, oh my God, Snap-on has new green pry bars and mine are not green and I want green. And then they buy it. But the tooling thing, it's, you hear online that people are like, oh, well, you shouldn't be able to claim tools on taxes. It's like that. I have to have that to do my job. And you have to. And every dealer in every shop has a certain requirement of tools that you have to have. Most of the time, you have to have up through half-inch drive, right? And they have, up through a certain size wrench, things like that. But every shop is different. I worked at an international dealership for 4 months when I first started in the industry. Then I jumped right into John Deere because they didn't have any work and they were cutting everybody's hours. And I had like a 40-hour paycheck of 2 weeks and I couldn't afford that. And I'm like, yeah, fuck that. So the only people actually that would hire me on, I interviewed with tons of truck dealerships and truck shops. The only people that would hire me was the John Deere dealership that I happened to just decide to go talk to them on a whim. And that was a whole nother ball game going from, the truck world to the equipment world and the tooling and what you're required to do. But long story short, I've worked at a bunch of different John Deere shops within the same company. I've moved locations, whatever.
Right.
And even within the same companies or within John Deere, they all have different tool requirements. And there was a shop that I worked at one point in time where their specialty tools, I started buying some of the specialty tools from John Deere because I got tired of going to the fucking tool room and looking for the little tiny feeler gauges we use for our 13.5 valve adjustments and the cam timing pins. And I got tired of fucking trying to find those because they were never in there. So I just fucking bought my own.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But then sometimes you go to dealerships and they're super fucking organized. They got a checkout sheet. They know what they have. Really,
dude, point me in the direction. Point me in the direction of that one. You know what I mean? Because like those facilities, I've been in some of those facilities. The dealer that I work for has some of those facilities that are like that. They got like sweet checkout boxes where you gotta check it out of a little box and it's all illuminated in there, and it's like some kind of heavenly sound when you open the door. Point me in the direction of that shop because I'm down. But I'm in the same boat as you. Like for Cummins, like I said, I consider myself more of a Cummins specialist, just with my specialty is mainly Cummins. So I have all kinds of Cummins specialty tools, front and rear main installers, cam wedges like you were talking about, timing stuff that you go to get it in the shop. And it's not just it's every shop I've worked at has been like that. You go in there to get it and it's gone. Somebody else
you got to
is
spend an hour figuring out who has it, and then the person that has it's got to look through their giant pile of shit on their workbench to try and find it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's like I do the same thing, all my normal everyday specialty tooling that I use, I own my own because it's just so much easier for me, even though it's hourly and my paycheck is the same whether I do it in 40 hours or I do it in 35 hours. It's, I want to get on to the next project. I'm not trying to sit on the same project.
Did you ever work in a shop that your bonus system was based on your performance, proficiency, and efficiency numbers?
Yeah, so I did work at a dealer when I first came down here to the South that had a bonus incentive program like that. It was actually pretty good. I got a pretty good bonus pretty regularly because they also paid a mentorship bonus, which was pretty. Yeah, so I mentored two apprentices while I was working there, and I got a bonus for that. They paid bi-weekly, so every bi-weekly I got a couple $100 for training these apprentices, and then I also got an efficiency bonus and a proficiency bonus, which I always hit, and it like ramped up, but then it capped at like 110%. So I would run my numbers to like 112, and then I just vibe right there. And
that brings up a good point. There's a big controversy with the bonus systems and having bonuses based off efficiency proficiency numbers. There's a big controversy with that. I've worked under a bonus system like that, which I did really well on actually. And we actually didn't have a cap. There's people making extra $1,000 a month sometimes. That was at one of my John Deere dealerships I worked at. But there was I made an extra $600. I think was my best month. Which was fucking nice. That's $300 a paycheck of extra money. But there's a controversy with that, right? There's controversy of, is this going to make it so technicians rush too much through something, because we all know the saying as technicians, it's better to do it right the first time and take longer than it is to do it twice fast, right?
Yeah.
So there's some people, and there's some controversy that having a bonus system set up like that creates lazy mechanics that are fast, which, I've always had the idea that every really good mechanic is in some way, shape, or form lazy. We're trying to find the easiest way to do something, the smartest way to do it, right? We're not trying, we all know there's that technician that will struggle their way through everything because they just work harder, not smarter sometimes. But so what is your opinion on the bonus system? Because in some ways it makes people want to make time, right? They want to, and especially nowadays with the younger technicians, sometimes it's hard to give them something to want to make time,
Right.
So what's your opinion on a bonus system setup like that and the pros and cons to it?
I feel like there is some pros to it for sure. And if you put the right things in place to look over the work that's being performed by your technicians, that the system can be pretty good. If trucks are being properly, or trucks or equipment, whatever it is, if that stuff is being properly QC'd after the repair is complete, then you can track problems with the technician before it gets to your customer, ideally. So I feel like if you put something in place like that, where every job is quality controlled by, say, the foreman or a lead in the shop, then and they got some sort of checklist where it can be there's a check and a balance, and that person can be held accountable, then I feel like that would work out great. But we both know that probably wouldn't be followed very well. Sometimes it can be, and sometimes it can't be. All of that stuff is it's a toss up,
Yeah.
But I feel like if you have something like that in place, you could you could successfully do that. The flat rate shops do it all the time. So and there's some really successful companies out there that only work flat rate with no guarantee. And then their techs, like 1 through 3 or whatever levels, are on an hourly guarantee. So, I mean, it must work sometimes, or part of the time, or 60% of the time. Otherwise, other people wouldn't do it, But I did want to add something in there. When I was a junior technician, one of the old hands at that fleet shop used to tell me, "Hey, you're not going to work here forever. I know it'd be awesome if you did, but you're not going to work here forever." And he used to tell me all the time, "You'll never get fired for being too slow, but you'll get fired for fucking shit up."
Yep.
So I just got a speed, man. I put that cruise control on, and it gets done as quickly as I can, but as I'll try to do the best job every time,
Well, and we all know as young mechanics, the first year and a half is rough.
Oh yeah.
You feel like you're gonna you feel like you fuck up everything you touch, right? And it's rough. I actually had a young lady on my first episode, and she's wanting to be a mechanic, and I've talked to her before in person. She actually came up to see me when I worked in a shop, and her whole thing is like she's scared to fuck shit up. She's scared to not do good enough because she's got that drive and that hunger that she just wants to be good at it, and she wants to be good at everything. And like, how do you handle it when you're fucking shit up? And it's like, well, the only fuck up is when you do it twice, right? The only true mistake you make is if you do it twice. Obviously, as you know, and what you just covered, sometimes mistakes are made almost intentionally, or like you're like, I think I can get away with this because you're trying to make time, which is not a correct way to approach, a job. But the other thing with the bonus system is sometimes I've heard of shops having this problem. The shops that I've worked at with bonus systems, I've always worked in a shop that everybody's willing to help everybody. It's a great environment. Everybody is willing to help everybody. They had it to where, if you're helping me, let's say a technician is helping me, they clock onto my job, so they're not racking up time on theirs. Right. So it's racking up time on mine. That's fair. I believe that's fair. In some shops, they don't do that. So people are less likely to help each other or want to help each other because they know it's going to cut into their time, which is cutting into their bonus. So
I think
I think another thing to add to that too would be that, like, say Melissa's really good at that particular job and I'm not as good at it. And I'm like, hey, Melissa, how do you do this as fast as you do it? You're not incentivized to teach me how to do that as quickly because you would not make as much money if I can do it as fast as you can do it. And they're feeding you that work constantly because they know that Melissa's really, really fast at that particular type of job. So they're going to keep feeding that work to you.
That
But
was
if I
smooth
can do it,
backhoe transmissions.
you know, but if they're going to feed that to me too, that's less of that gravy train work for you that I'm kind of spooning some of that off.
Which, I mean, I've always been fine with that. I've always loved helping people. I've always loved teaching people. I've never been one to be like, I'm gonna hold all my secrets in this box
right.
and not like tell
And me neither.
anybody.
Yeah.
I've met technicians like that though. They're
Yeah.
actually kind of few and far between, but I've met technicians like that that are kind of like, actually the only
but
problem I've ever had with a male technician was an older gentleman that was working at an ag dealership I started at. And at the time, he was getting all the construction work, even though they weren't like it was the only John Deere dealership in that area. And even though they were technically green, they did take on some of the yellow equipment from farmers. He was primarily the construction technician. And I showed up coming from a construction dealership, and
right.
the boss, not only did this man fuck up everything he touched and had some really major problems with the work that he did, but I also had the actual like the dealership experience on that equipment. So, and I mean, I'm not going to say I'm perfect. I fuck shit up too, but for the most part, I did okay. So I was fed a lot of that work, and he was insanely mad at me for a long time. He actually got fired. Back to you only get fired if you fuck up a lot, not if you take too long. He got fired because he fucked up a bunch of shit, like major shit, like $20,000 backhoe transmissions and stuff like that. That I actually had to finish his last job for him. That's the only time I've really ever run into somebody like that, is because he felt like I was taking his work from him.
Yeah, and honestly, I haven't run into too much of it myself. I feel like if you're senior in your shop and you see somebody acting like that you should probably square them away or let somebody that has more power than you square it away. But if you're truly a senior, you should be fairly respected as a leader in your facility. And if you're like, hey, knock that crap off, then typically it kind of square itself away. I think that there's a lot of power that senior technicians have, or they're afraid to speak up or afraid to ruffle any feathers. But listen, we're all out here to make money, and I'm the same way as you are. If I'm an open book, if there's something I know and you want to know it, I will drop everything to show you how to do it the same way I do it.
Yeah. Well, and
Not
obviously
everybody.
there's some technicians that are like, especially when you're training, and I was this way even. I think everybody went through this phase when they were a young technician where they're like, no, I'm going to do it by myself because I'm an independent technician. I don't need no help. Right. We all
Yeah.
went through that where they're like, we can do this. And, sometimes, and I distinctly remember my technicians I work next to doing this to me. And I've done it to other technicians where, I'm like, hey, if you like try it this way, might work a little bit better for you because I can see you're struggling. And they're like, no, I'm going to do it my way. Okay, have fun with that. Let me know when you're about 2 hours in and you still can't figure it out, then come get me later. Then I'll be happy to show you. But I think all of us are a little bit stubborn at times. I kind of learned over the years that, and even at year 7, I still needed help sometimes. You still need help sometimes. And what I learned is, like, if it's going to take 15 minutes to ask the guy next to you to run a machine to help you line up a coupler or a bucket and line up pins on something or do whatever it is, if it's going to take 15 minutes if they help you, or if it's going to take 3 hours if you try to do it by yourself, what's more cost effective to the customer? At that point, your pride doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
Your customer is paying $145 an hour for you to work on this. I'm pretty sure they're going to be fine with another technician putting their time on it and having 30 minutes worth of time on that job than 3 hours of your time because you wanted to do it by yourself and you were being stubborn.
Yeah,
So,
ultimately, yeah, you're right. And ultimately, when we're working on things, we need to be customer minded, I think is a good way to put it. You know, we got to be thinking of
humble
our customers. Yeah.
too.
And thinking of our customers' best interest, because I feel like there is a bit of a negative stigma on mechanics that we're out to rip them off.
Yeah.
There's plenty of that out there and we don't need to add or fuel to that idea. We need to let them know that we're here to help. We want to help them. Like we don't come into work to fuck somebody's stuff up or
Yeah.
to rip them off. Like we just come in to fix stuff.
Yep. So I was always big on, obviously you got to be a little careful with helping customers over the phone, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You learn that real early. That's another thing you learn when you're
But
green.
if you've got a customer and all they want is for you to look up a code, look up the fucking code for them.
Yeah.
Because guess what? When they can't figure it out, who are they going to call?
That's
The
right.
person that was willing to help them, Yep. And I learned that. I actually ran one of the shops I worked in while they were in between hiring bosses for about 3 months. And I did all of I scheduled the field work, I scheduled the shop work, I talked to customers. And I learned a lot about, especially in this particular shop, I was a secondhand man to the boss the whole time anyways. I mean, we helped set the shop up, actually, because this is a brand new shop. I set up the entire tool room, right? I did all of that shit. And so I kind of had a emotional investment into the shop. And when I started, it was small. We were a small crew. I wasn't just a mechanic. I was a shop mechanic. I was the boss when my boss was out. I was answering the phones when he was busy doing other things. I was helping with checking machines in and out of the yard. And we were actually a pretty decent team because we all worked together we had to work together because we didn't have enough people to fill all these positions. We were small. We were just starting. And I learned a lot about interacting with customers in that shop, especially. And that's a pretty important skill, I believe, that all technicians should have, is how to interact with customers and how to interact with them properly. So
yeah, 100%. One thing that I do, since I'm in the field and I'm face to face with my customers all the time, like literally every call I go to, I'm face to face with a customer. We do all of I have an apprentice with me 50 hours a week. So, they are there right by my side, learning and seeing just like a child. It's just like raising a kid, to be honest with you. I'm teaching them everything that I literally know. And they're watching me interact with customers. How do I talk to them? How do I talk to them on the phone? How do I talk to them face to face? The value of a handshake, all of those type of things. You would come to a customer and you tell them you're going to do something, and you better mean it.
Yeah, respect and have respect for them, and
that customer, every customer, I try to tell these junior technicians, every customer, I'm trying to make a customer for life every single time. And when you go to another dealer, they will continue to call you. Where are you working at now? They're trying to still come to you because they want you. It's what you bring to the table. It's not always necessarily the dealer or the independent that you work at. They're trying to come to you.
I've definitely had customers that, I've worked on their stuff before, and this is over the course of the last 7 years. I've had a few customers that will specifically ask for me, which makes me feel good. Right.
Yeah.
I actually had a customer drive his log skidder all the way from like mid Colorado all the way up to the Four Rivers shop I worked at in northern Colorado, just so I would work on it. Because, I kind of give props to my dad for that, because my dad's a logger. He knew the guy for years. The guy's like, I want to take this thing to a dealership. I want it done right. Who do I call? And my dad's like, well, my fucking daughter is working in Four Rivers, so fucking send it to her. She'll be all over it. And I do, because especially machines like that, I have a personal investment in that machine. And even at dealerships, trucks, maybe not so much, because trucks are going all over the country. But
That's
at
right.
equipment dealerships, a lot of the machines stay in those areas. So you really do. You get to know the customers really well. You get to know the machines. And there is a point in time where you reach that of some of these customers in these machines, you have almost a personal vendetta to do good, or
Yeah.
make this customer happy because they've always been good to you, or you work on this machine a lot, so the machine, the kinks, the quirks it's got.
Yeah.
And it's
But
pretty
the more,
rewarding work, actually.
that's right. The more invested you are in, the more rewarding it feels. Um, and that just goes to show you, when you go the extra mile for every job, there's going to be a couple of times where you do a job for a customer and you go the extra mile, and it screws you.
Yeah,
But
or
you
you
can't let that,
fuck it up, right?
right. And
And
you
it
can't,
gets fucked
you
up.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you can't let that one get you. You got to go to the next job, and you got to carry on and try to do it the same way that you would have done it anyway. You can't let those couple of bad jobs sour your whole deal. Like, a lot of people that work with me directly, they joke around, they call me Picasso and all kinds of stupid stuff like that, because I paint everything. So
I
like,
do
I'll do
too. I do. I
yes,
do too.
I will do
Yep,
a turbo
water
job.
pumps, turbos. Yep, I paint
Fuck
all that
yeah,
shit. All that shit. It's a
dude,
pride
that stuff.
deal.
That,
You bought a new
yeah,
turbo. I want it to look like you bought a new turbo.
that's what I'm saying.
Engines. Like, there's a lot of people that will slap you long blocks, for an example.
Oh
They'll
my
just
god.
slap all that old shit onto the black block, right?
Hell no.
And then ship it out. I'm like, no, motherfucker. That dude paid like fucking 30 grand for me to do this, 20 grand for me to do this. I want it to look like he paid 20 grand. I don't know how long the paint's gonna last, but it's gonna look fucking pretty when it leaves here. And I never make time on long blocks for that exact reason, because I fucking paint all the parts and I paint it as I go, right? So yeah, I'm the same
Yeah,
way.
that stuff pisses me off to no end. So that's what I do all the time. Like, I did some teeth on a bucket. I don't remember what the brand was at it, this customer that I work at. They have John Deere's and loaders, and they have cat loaders, and multiple different brands, but they're all fairly new. But I put scraper blades on them,
Yeah.
and teeth, and I'll weld new stubs on them. They got some backhoes, and I'll weld stubs on those and put new teeth on them and stuff like that. But anyway, like, I put some teeth on a backhoe bucket the other day, and I backed it up, put it on the done line for him, and the operator came to get it, and he was checking it all over, make sure it was all good, and then he come back to their foreman or whatever, and then he came back to me and he's like, "Did you paint that whole bucket?" I was like, "Well, yeah, I mean, that's like my trademark, dude. I paint everything." I'm like, "Dude, that's why I've been coming and working for you for 30 to 40 hours a week for 2 years. Like, that customer, I go work 30 hours a week for him uh, at his shop. And that's just the type of work that I do each and every time." And I was like, "Dude, you knew what to expect." What'd you think I
Yeah,
was going to
it's
do?
a pride deal. And I do the same thing with welding, actually.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I'm some star fucking welder. Okay. I've been doing it for a long fucking time, but I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I'm a master welder. I'm
Yeah.
decent at it. I can do a decent job. On the occasion that I have a shit weld come out, I will grind that motherfucker off and re-weld it as
Oh,
many
yeah.
times as it takes to make it look good. Right. And that's even including root passes. I do not like to have a shit root pass.
Yeah.
I had one instance where I was trying to weld. We had to put a thumb on an excavator, and it was typical salesman job. The thumb was not actually for that machine, but instead of, buying the right thumb, we had to make it work. And so we had a company air lance out the pin bosses for that
Yeah.
thumb where it bolts to the arm. And we had to center it and then re-weld it. Well, that was my job. So I got all that shit going. I welded all my root passes, and this is thick metal. So you got to preheat all
Yeah.
of it with a
Oh, yeah.
torch, right? I got all my root passes done. I was so proud of it. I don't blame my job for having somebody else do the cover passes on that, because I was actually traveling at the time to I had some family stuff happen at the time, and I had to leave town like last minute. I had some family shit I had going on, and
Right.
I had to leave. And the mechanic that I was really hoping they would just leave it, because me and my dad were going to do this thing. It was only going to be a short few days. I'm like, dude, leave it till I come back on Monday. I'll weld all the cover passes. That didn't happen. Another kid welded the cover passes, and this kid's a great kid, and he knows he's not like a star welder. He was just doing what he was told, but
Right.
it did not look the way I wanted that machine to leave, and I was not happy about it. But like I said, I'm the person that if I weld something wrong and it doesn't look good, I will
Yeah.
grind it off and re-weld it as many times as it takes to make it look good. But
Yeah, one thing I did learn about heavy equipment because I do a lot of heavy equipment work for that customer is that, like, dude, I'm welding all the time.
yeah,
Fabricating random crap that, like, I've tried to order it from Cat and I can't get it for like 900 years.
yep,
And I'm like, dude, I pull it down, I put it on, I find another piece of metal the same thickness as steel, and I'll use a plasma cutter and cut out that spacer that I need. I made I can't remember what they called it, a boss.
yeah, like a pin
And
boss.
yeah, no, it was like a threaded boss, and it welds to the one of the arms, and yeah, pin boss, because
Yeah,
the pin slides over that
yep.
boss, and then your bolt goes through it and holds it in. And
Pin
it
goes
was,
inside it. Yeah.
well, this one was on the outside, and there's a little bolt that threads into it, and
Okay.
it holds the pin from coming out.
Yeah. Yeah. Pin retainer.
Anyway, yeah, and it was broke off, and I called all over hell, and then some random old timer that was down the road at a welding shop was like, "Oh yeah, I got a whole ship out of those. Let's come over and get you a couple." So I went over there and got them, and cut it off and welded that joker on. But it's just, it seems like it's a lot of welding, just a ton
It
of
is.
welding.
People
I'm a
don't.
good welder, but yeah, it's just a lot of
Welding
welding.
is such an important skill to have in this industry. It is such an important skill to have, and people don't realize it, especially in heavy equipment or even shop. You know how much tools and shit I've had to build with a welder, or down to the things like, bearing races.
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah,
weld those out, or
I do the same. Yep.
you got a pin stuck or a bolt that you're trying to get out, and you fucking have to tack weld something onto there to try and, I've
Yeah.
had I've had to use, like, for an example, I was working on, I don't remember if it was a 7R or a 6R tractor. It was a long time ago. Anyways, the oscillation pin for the front axle was seized in there. So what I ended up doing was welding the fuck out of this giant, like, threaded all thread rod, welded the fuck out of
Right.
that thing onto the front of that pin, and then I actually took a front main seal installer and put that over the pin because it fit over the pin, and then I could tighten the nut down and pull that pin out.
Right.
It's just little things like that, like, even though you're not fabricating, maybe you're not building shit, you're putting a fucking auxiliary hydraulic kit on an excavator. Guess what? You have
Yeah.
to weld on every single bracket for that. It's the
Yeah.
little things, and if you welding, having that skill for welding goes a long way, and torch work.
Oh yeah, torch. You know how many apprentices I get that can't turn on a torch, or
That
they don't.
blows my mind.
Yeah.
That actually leads me to one of the main questions. I'm trying to wrap this up a little bit here. One of
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
main questions is, do you feel like schooling would have benefited you? And if you were going to give advice to another young mechanic going into this industry, would you have them follow the similar path that you did, or would you have them, I don't try a trade school?
Well, I feel like if you can get, so money is the biggest driving factor. So if you can get into a tech school, I feel like that's really reasonable. Then I say go for it, because I feel like that will give you a little bit of a leg up compared to, say, an apprentice that comes in that we interview, and you're interviewing side by side with somebody who has zero knowledge. You are going to get an opportunity before that person would.
Yeah.
So I would say that for sure. But if you're going to go spend 40,000 on a school, I feel like, unless they have like a specialty school that you're trying to go to, like maybe Volvo, for instance, you're trying to go work for a Volvo dealer and they've got a Volvo specific training. Like, I don't know if they still have DATE over at the school that you went to. They used to have the DATE program for Volvo over there.
They changed ownerships, as I don't know if you're familiar with the fact that they changed ownerships. When I went, they had the DATE program. Now they actually have, believe it or not, WyoTech has a heavy equipment side.
Oh, bitchin'.
Yeah, and they've got companies that have been donating or giving to or take their machines exclusively to WyoTech for work. So,
that's pretty dope.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I feel like
yeah.
if you can go to a school that has, if you're going to spend a bunch of money, go to one that has the specialty stuff that you're trying to get to. Because
so what if you don't know what you want to work on yet?
So
do you think a general trade school is a decent idea?
Yeah, like, so say you just go to a general community college that has a reputable diesel program, then you might go there and spend $6,000 to $10,000 and realize, hey, this shit ain't for me.
Yeah.
And then you're not out 40 grand, or whatever. So I feel like that's kind of where I stand on schooling as far as that goes. Now, I'm the way mechanics are right now, the shortage, the way it is, I feel like if you could get into a fleet and get a lot of these fleets are offering OEM training now. So like in the truck side, so like I think like Ryder and Penske and a lot of those big names like that, they offer legitimate OEM Cummins training that you could work on there for a few years, get some good experience, and then go right to a dealer and just get some crazy money. So I feel like if I were to do it all over again, that's the route that I would go. Is I would go to a fleet that offers OEM training. I would tough it out there and learn as much as I could, and then I would still probably end up at a dealer, because the OEM training, after having a taste of it, that is pretty much the standard, And I feel like as mechanics, like we are, like what's the ultimate level of a mechanic? Like we have the masters, like you can be an OEM master, but I feel like to be like a rep, you got like the district service managers, which are for the OEM, and like they're real highly technical, highly skilled. They've done all of the possible OEM training that's out there. I feel like that's the top tier that you could ever be as a mechanic. So I guess you would just kind of have to figure out where your goals are. But right off the rip, I feel like if I had to do it all over again, I'd still end up at a fleet, and I would go with one that offers OEM type of training.
Yeah. Well, that answers that question. Well, I appreciate you coming on here and giving your opinions on stuff and talking about, kind of what companies can help do to help the younger technicians. And then we talked about, younger technicians and their path that they could take.
I got to be 100. I was pleasantly surprised with your technical aspects that you have. I didn't come in thinking any otherwise, but it was a pleasure to have a conversation with you.
Thank you.